Here's what's coming up on the world today. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Finland will join NATO on Tuesday, April the 4th. Plus, teachers in England reject pay offer and announce further strikes. Welcome back. Teachers in England have overwhelmingly rejected a pay offer from the British government aimed at ending a series of disruptive strikes. That's according to their trade union announcing 2 further days of walkouts. The National Education Union, Britain's largest education union, said 98% of teachers who voted in the ballot followed its advice to reject the offer of a one-off payment this year of £1,000 and an average pay rise of 4.5% in the next financial year. Tens of thousands of teachers across Britain have taken strike action this year in demand an above-inflation pay award, leaving classrooms empty and heaping pressure on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to help resolve the dispute. The union said teachers would take 2 further days of strike action on April 27th and May the 2nd. Let's bring in our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka. Juliana, thanks for joining us today. The National Education Union has rejected a pay offer from the British government aimed at ending a series of disruptive strikes. Can you speak to us a little bit about this?
Well, good afternoon. That's absolutely right. Not a great way to kick-start the Easter half-term break. Lots of parents are already struggling to get away for half-term because there are a series of strikes affecting the Dover-Calais border, as well as the announcement that a 5-week strike for passport workers is going to start. And then we had the announcement, as you said, from the National Education Union this morning, which represents almost 200,000 teachers across England. They have been conducting their annual conference at Harrogate, and over 98% of those that were balloted have rejected the pay offer from the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan. Now, for some people, the pay offer may sound nice. What was on the table was a one-off payment of £1,000, which, depending on where you're looking at, is equivalent to about £1 million. Plus, starting from the new school term in September, teachers would be receiving a 4.5% pay rise. So if you look at it holistically, the average teacher's salary in England would be about £30,000. But the NEU has said that it was basically an insult, that they cannot accept the offer, that it still means they're behind in terms of payment if you compare it to what teachers in Scotland and Wales have been offered, and it's still below inflation, which is currently running at double digits in the UK. So yes, not great. We're expecting 2 more dates of strike disruption on the 27th of April and on the 2nd of May. And as I said, it just comes at a time which is not great, just at the start of the Easter half term, where parents are already stretched in the UK, and now they have to take 2 more days off work to accommodate this industrial action.
And Juliana, you say that it was rejected, and is it purely because it just doesn't even match inflation? What are the reasons they've rejected, and what are the educators really looking for?
Well, they're looking for more money. You know, we have an issue here which can sound like a hashtag first world problem, but it is really difficult to live in the UK at the moment. The cost of living crisis is the worst that we've seen in over 40 years, and we've seen the evidence. We've actually filmed it from the Channels TV London studios here in the British capital, where we are seeing teachers, nurses, other members of the public who are working, who are still having to go to food banks so they can eat. Rents are high. There was some data released last week from Zoopla, which is a pretty significant property search engine, which kind of looks at about 98% of properties available in the UK. Renting is soaring. Bills are high. We've now reached the month of April, so anybody that was eligible before this month to receive government handouts to pay with their energy bills are no longer going to receive that. Mobile phone bills are higher. Council tax is higher. So I think teachers are really asking for an affordable living wage. I actually happen to be a school governor myself at my daughter's local primary school. It's a primary school that's doing exceptionally well compared to Ofsted standards, which is the education regulator. And anytime I go to these governorship meetings once a quarter, you're seeing the results. You're seeing that it's really difficult for head teachers to retain staff, good teachers, the teachers who are qualified to teach maths, so you may have a maths degree, teachers that are qualified to teach English, that may have an English degree. They're leaving the profession in their droves. They're deciding to start their career in places where they can earn more money, because it's just really difficult to teach. In fact, there are some teachers that have been on the airwaves today in the UK, and they've been talking about stories where they're having to buy their own stationery. So we're talking about a pair of scissors and Pritt stick to stick things on the wall. They're seeing students coming very, very hungry, and they're having to dip into their pocket so they can take some money home to have a decent meal. These are real stories, and it's impacting teachers who are already struggling. Remember as well, we're just coming out of a series of lockdowns. Lots of students were out of school for up to a year. There's so much catch up that these students need. When you're a parent, or when you're somebody that's observing, it can be really difficult to understand it. But when you're somebody in a classroom that's having to deal with with students that are suffering with mental health issues, or who are coming to school with wet clothes and an empty stomach because, you know, their parents just cannot afford to dry their clothes or give them a decent meal before coming to school, that really impacts them. And I think that's why some of the teachers do have the support from the general public. And we've heard from the Prime Minister, we've heard from Gillian Keegan today, they are not budging. So unfortunately, I think we've got to anticipate more industrial action in the near future.
So, Juliana, you say that the NEU has rejected the offer. What do you anticipate the government will do now?
Well, we've heard from the government, as I've just said. We are in recess. We've got a 2-week half-term break, so Parliament won't be sitting over the next couple of weeks. But the Prime Minister has been in Rochdale, at Rotherham, just in the north of England, talking about sexual harassment and other crimes there. And he did speak to the press, and he said that he's bitterly disappointed. Of course, we already had 6 days of industrial action in February and March. So already students have lost more than a week of school. Not only have students lost a week of school, of course, if you're a parent like myself and there is no school, you've got to be at home. So it has a negative impact on the entire British economy. But he says he's not budging, and I think the government is sticking to a hard line, because of course it's not just the teachers who are striking. It's not just the teachers who are asking for more money. I mentioned previously that we've also got a 5-week strike for civil servants who are working in passport offices. We already have strikes within the NHS and so many other sectors. So I think the government are trying to crawl a delicate balancing act. Of course, they want the issue to be resolved, but I think they're being very careful with the rhetoric, because, of course, if they bow down to the union bosses, they're going to have to keep doing that for other sectors too. And according to the Treasury, the government just doesn't have enough in its coffers to offer the support that the union bosses are demanding.
Thank you for that. Juliana, the government has argued that higher pay rises would only worsen inflation. What is the UK Finance Minister, Jeremy Hunt, saying on this?
Well, that's exactly the line that we heard, I think, late last year, early this year. We were all told, and we were convinced a couple of weeks ago when Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, who's been put in place to be seen as a steady pair of hands. He is, of course, a very senior politician here in the UK, and he did manage to revive markets after the disaster of the Kwasi Kwarteng Liz Truss budget in September. But you know, he told us that double-digit inflation was a thing of the past. And we got the data from the ONS saying that it's going nowhere soon. And they've always said that the problem with offering massive pay rises is if you give people this money, then what are they going to do? They're going to spend it. You spend more, there is not enough produce, the demand goes higher, pay goes things cost more. That appears to be the analogy from the government, and indeed they are sticking to it. We are yet to hear what the Chancellor has to say, but it is quite a slow news week in the UK. Of course, we've got the markets closed on Friday for Good Friday. So in a way, this news is pretty good for the government because it's come out at a time where most people are not focusing on what's coming out of the news screens. But it is going to be a really, really difficult time, not just for parents, but also for students, because we are getting to that time of the year where people are studying for GCSEs, people are studying for their SATs exams, and every second in the classroom is absolutely necessary, bearing in mind that we had 2 years of disruption due to COVID, and some students have just not been able to catch up.
So what does the school look like? Are they opened? Are they closed? What's the education sector looking like at the moment?
Okay, well, schools are closed at the moment because we're in Easter and it's half term. You know, it's quite different because, of course, the NEU are representing teachers in England. And this is where there is a bit of issue because Scotland, I believe they accepted about a 7% pay rise from the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. I believe Mark Drakeford offered teachers in Wales, Mark Drakeford being the Welsh First Minister, about a 3% pay rise. So teachers in England are feeling pretty left out because they feel as if their colleagues across the borders have been satisfied and settled, but they haven't. I think when it came to the strikes, the 6 days of strikes that we saw last month and in February, over 50% of schools were shut. And as I said, it has a knock-on effect for the rest of the economy. This background has become familiar with viewers at channels because, of course, when the schools are closed, you can't go to work. It's very, very, very difficult. And you need people going to work because you need people buying coffees at lunchtime and going for a drink when they close their doors, because we are a service-based economy. 80% of our GDP comes from people wining and dining and doing all they can within the hospitality sector. Just one day of an industrial action like schools closing has massive ramifications, and that is going to be a test for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who's already looking on the ropes. If you look at the latest polls, according to some people, if there was a general election tomorrow, the Conservative Party would be out. Labour would be very much in. So he's got to be very careful with his rhetoric. But as it stands, 2 further days of industrial action for teachers is not great. But let's see if Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, will meet with the union bosses after the Easter half term. So fingers crossed, our kids won't be missing those 2 very important days at school, which we all need. We do like our kids to be at school when they can be. I think we've had enough at the weekends.
Parents and teachers alike, I'm sure, need their kids to be in school. And it's really a shame that you know, Wales and Scotland were able to come to some sort of agreement, yet we're still here out of an agreement. Could you speak to that, why they were able to come to an agreement? And
well, gosh, that's a £1 million question, and that's why we're going through a winter of discontent that's dragging very much into the spring. I think that the Conservative Party are quite notably against union bosses. In fact, there was a piece of legislation that the Prime Minister has been attempting to get through Parliament, basically making it illegal for a sector to allow staff to strike without having inadequate cover during the strike. Also, as well, if there isn't inadequate cover, then union bosses can be hauled into courts, and firms who do not have cover can also be fined. Some people say that is absolutely ridiculous. And what is the point of being able to take industrial action if, when you decide to ballot, your working conditions can still go on? So that is a major issue. And I think Rishi Sunak unsuccessfully tried for about 3 months to get the public on side, and people weren't listening to it because people were like, actually, I don't have the courage to strike. I don't have the possibility to strike. I'm not in a union, but I'm not happy with my job. I'm not happy with my pay, and I'm not happy with my working conditions. So typically, if you do a poll of people who were walking across the street, they would say that they are completely for those who are striking. But of course, we have devolved nations, and Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. I know Northern Ireland are currently trying to negotiate with their unions. They are able to make their decisions on their own. Obviously, with England being the seat of the capital, and Westminster discourse really shaped around what happens in London, of course, discussions are completely different. But as it stands, the government have offered £1,000. They've offered a 4.3% pay rise. They've said that there'll be £2.2 billion of investment in schools over the next 2 years, and they said they'll see over half a billion pounds in infrastructure development over the next 12 months. For union bosses, that's just not enough.
All right, Juliana, thank you so very much for your time. And a former principal of an ultra-Orthodox Jewish school in Australia has been found guilty of sexually abusing 2 former students by a court in Melbourne. After a 6-week trial, a jury found 56-year-old Malka Leifer guilty of 18 offenses, including rape, indecent assault, and sexual penetration of a child aged 16 or 17. 3 sisters, Nicole Meyer, Dassie Ehrlich, and Ellie Sapper, accused Leifer of sexually abusing them between 2003 and 2007. The court found Leifer guilty of offenses against Ehrlich and Sapper, but not Meyer. The former principal pleaded not guilty to all 27 charges against her. The 3 sisters alleged the offenses took place on school grounds, in locked staff offices, on school camps, and at Leifer's home.
To get to this moment is absolutely overwhelming. When we look back at the journey that it took, everything that happened in Israel, it was so unbelievable that we would get to this time, and we have. She's guilty. She's guilty. That can't be taken away. She is guilty. She did what she did to us, and it has been proven beyond reasonable doubt. She is guilty.
She abused the 3 of us for so many years, and while today's verdict may not properly reflect that, today Malka Leifer was finally held accountable. She is guilty, and she will be held accountable. Justice was served today.
That's all we've ever wanted. Since we started this battle, since we gave our police statements in 2011, to hear the word guilty is what she has fought not to be for so many years, and what we have fought for so many years to prove.
The death toll from violent storms that whipped up tornadoes in the South and Midwest over the weekend rose to at least 29 on Sunday, as residents in the affected areas assessed the damage and began a daunting cleanup effort. U.S. President Joe Biden declared a major disaster in Arkansas on Sunday, ordering federal aid to help with the recovery. In Tennessee, the Department of Health confirmed 7 weather-related deaths near the Mississippi border, and officials reported 4 deaths in Illinois, including 1 in Belvidere. Casualties were also reported deaths in Indiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. 1 person was killed in Delaware after a line of powerful storms tore through the region on Saturday night. The National Storm Prediction Center warned of severe weather on Sunday in parts of Texas. It also forecast severe weather for Tuesday between Chicago and Little Rock. Meanwhile, aid workers ramped up relief efforts in hard-hit Arkansas on Sunday as the death toll from tornadoes that ravaged parts of the Midwest rose to at least 32 over the weekend. In Little Rock, Arkansas, Capitol's volunteers gathered at churches and charity centers, preparing food for people whose lives were disrupted by the violent tornado. Volunteers cooked meals to be distributed by the Salvation Army, Goodwill, and other aid groups in storm-stricken neighborhoods. U.S. President Joe Biden declared a major disaster in Arkansas on Sunday, ordering federal aid to help with the recovery. The president said in a tweet that he and his wife Jill Biden were praying for the people impacted by the weekend storms and ordered relevant federal officials to help with immediate needs and long-term rebuilding. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson has announced that he's running for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, launching a challenge to former President Donald Trump, who remains the front runner despite his looming criminal indictment. Hutchinson, governor of the southern state from 2015 until early this year, he governed after serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, said he would make his formal announcement in Arkansas later this month, but has decided to run.
I have made a decision, and my decision is I'm going to run for president of the United States. First of all, the office is more important than any individual person. And so for the sake of the office of the presidency, I do think that's too much of a sideshow and distraction, and he needs to be able to concentrate on his due process, and there is a presumption of innocence.
Welcome back from the break. Finland's main conservative party has claimed victory in a tightly fought parliamentary election. With all of the votes counted on Sunday, the center-right National Coalition Party, NCP, came out on top at 20.8%. They were followed by the right-wing populist party, the Finns, with 20.1%, while Prime Minister Sanna Marin's Social Democrats garnered 19.9%. With the top three parties each getting around 20% of the vote, no party is in a position to form a government alone. Over 2,400 candidates from 22 parties were vying for the 200 seats in the Nordic country's parliament. Meanwhile, commuters in Helsinki said the change in government following Sunday's parliamentary election was because people wanted change. It comes as Finland's left-wing Prime Minister Sanna Marin conceded defeat last night as the opposition right-wing National Coalition Party, NCP, claimed victory in a tightly fought contest.
It's normal life. And I think it goes right, and then it goes back, and people see how the politics affect their lives, and then they change their opinion.
I think it's the challenging couple of years we have behind now. I guess people want to see change of any sort, and that might explain the result maybe a little bit.
When it comes to actually seeing who will be in charge, who will be the Prime Minister this time around, it's not so much about who exactly that will be. I don't think that will... yes, there is, like with Sanna Marin, there's been a lot of international interest, and there is a lot of fantastic things bringing to the forefront with women being in power and being able to run countries. But I don't think that the person who will run the government will be running it together with a lot of other people. That is not, we are not, how should I say, it's a democracy. It is not a one person leading the way and only saying what we'll do.
And Montenegro's former economy minister, Jakov Milotovic, has declared victory in a presidential election runoff over long-standing incumbent Milo Djukanovic, ending more than 3 decades of his rule in the small Balkan republic. 37-year-old Western-educated Milatovic, the deputy head of the Europe Now movement, campaigned on pledges to curb graft, improve living standards, and bolster ties with the European Union and fellow former Yugoslav Republic Serbia. In the capital, Podgorica, some of his jubilant supporters drove through the center, honking their car horns, while others set off fireworks or fired guns into the air. Milatovic won 60.1% to Djukanovic's 39.9%. The Podgorica-based Center for Monitoring and Research pollster said on the basis of results tabulated from a statistical sample of votes cast. Meanwhile, a pro-Western reformist bloc has won most of the votes in Bulgaria's parliamentary election. That's according to exit polls. But it is expected to struggle to form a stable coalition government in the European Union's poorest member state. The reformist bloc, comprised of the We Continue the Change and Democratic Bulgaria parties, won around 25.3% of the vote on Sunday, just ahead of a center-right bloc led by the Citizens for European Development of Bulgaria, of former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, which had around 24.7%. It was Bulgaria's fifth election in 2 years, as personal antipathy between the leaders of the two main blocs has hampered the formation of a stable coalition government. And for anyone visiting China for the first time, the Great Wall is a must-see, and it is for different reasons. For some, it's a bucket list experience, and for others, it holds other significance. Our foreign affairs correspondent visited the Great Wall of China amidst a group of international journalists, and now reports.
Known in Chinese as Wan Li Che Chang, you need a good night's sleep, comfortable shoes, clothes, sunscreen, and a light breakfast to start out on a perhaps once-in-a-lifetime experience of climbing the Great Wall of China. We were awed even before we arrived at the car park. We visited the part of the wall in Juyongwan, one of the three famous passes along the Great Wall. It is 37 miles from downtown Beijing and was a solid stronghold encircling a valley which was the northern direct access to Beijing in ancient times. It is so long, and it's a real feat and achievement if you're able to make it cross and come out at the other side. Something they say you must do if you are in China. The Juyong Pass is said to have been the first of three impregnable passes along the Great Wall. Built between the year 770 and 476 BC, and from 476 to 221 BC, it was first used in the Qin dynasty when Emperor Qin Shi Huang ordered the wall be built. The route was strategic for connecting the inner land and the area near the northern border of China, and was used to defend the ancient city of Beijing.
Emperor Qin Shi Huang unified China, and then he unified the separated walls. So the Great Wall was firstly and formally established. So after that, the Great Wall has been part of the Chinese history.
The wall is characterized by steep steps, towers and temples, and what is known as a cloud platform, where you'll find carvings of Buddhist figures and symbols, as well as Buddhist texts in 6 languages. The higher you go on the wall, the better your view of surrounding areas and hills. You get a sense of how significant or strategic the wall is, and awed by the amount of work that must have gone into building it. Not everyone, however, is able to make it through the Juyongwan Great Wall.
But I think that it's not easy for those who have not athletic form to climb the mountain.
So how about a session of Tai Chi? an internal Chinese martial art practice for defense training, health benefits, and meditation. And after 4 kilometers of climbing, a group, sparsely populated by now along the wall, is excited to be done.
At least we made it to the end, or I made it to the end. I was proud of myself when I came down. I was tired, but very proud of myself.
When the journey started, it was a bit frightening, but the more you climb, the more you build confidence in your ability to finish.
Declared a UNESCO Heritage Site in 1987, the Great Wall of China attracts up to 70,000 visitors each day during the peak season. The best time to visit, they say, is from April to May. Here in Beijing, China, Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
And finally on the program, scientists have broken the world record for the deepest fish ever caught, as well as the deepest fish ever filmed on camera. A juvenile snailfish part of the Leporidae family was filmed in August 2022 at a depth of 8,336 meters in the Izu Ogasawara Trench, beating the previous record in the Mariana Trench by the 158 meters. A few days later, the team collected 2 snailfish at 8,022 meters deep in the Japan Trench, the first fish to ever be collected from deeper than 8 kilometers. The research expedition by the University of Western Australia and the Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology was part of a 10-year study on the deepest fish in the world. And that's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Susan Ilian.